I think Nvidia stands out as particularly overpriced.
Hi everyone, JJ here with The Art of Value. Welcome back. Well, this one's a kind of a continuation of yesterday's interview with Aswath Damodaran. He talked about Nvidia and the overall Mag 7 stocks, and he says that Nvidia is way overpriced, and the two stocks that he thinks are a buy out of the Mag 7. Let's see what he says and I'll react to it.
The Magnificent Seven seeing nice gains following Q4 earnings. My next guest says while the names are richly priced, only one is, quote, priced to the point of insanity. Let's bring in the Dean of Valuation, Aswath Damodaran, NYU's Stern School of Business. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
The one that's priced to insanity, you suggest, is Nvidia, which is interesting because you own it along with all of the others, correct?
He owns it.
No, you bought these stocks at the right time. They were amazing buys at some point in time. At today's prices, I mean, all of the stocks looked overpriced. But I think Nvidia stands out as particularly overpriced. I mean, just to get a collective sense of what these seven companies account for in the S&P 500, these seven stocks alone account for 70% of the overall market cap of the index. They account for 11% of the revenues, but they do account for 27% of the gross profit. So they're very profitable, very valuable companies.
That's pretty incredible stat.
And you can get pretty close to the current prices for the other companies. Nvidia, I can't even get close.
I'm surprised somewhat, if only because the valuation of Nvidia has come down as its earnings and guidance have gone up. So
this was about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, before the last earnings. They came out with impressive earnings just since this interview, and he came back on. Yesterday's video was about that, but I'm going back to see what he says about the Mag 7 back about a month ago.
In some respects, what was perhaps insane has actually been justified in some respects.
No, in a sense, there is an adjustment process going on. I know where it'll end up. The truth is, when this process started, people assumed that NVIDIA's domination of AI, the chip part of the business, would continue in perpetuity. I think the other chip companies are waking up. Things are going to start to scale down. So I think in spite of the come down in price, I am more wary about NVIDIA than I was, simply because last time I valued it, NVIDIA was at $400. It gives me some kind of perspective in terms of at 682. I mean, that's a stretch. That's
682, and now it's $852, so it's gone up significantly since this interview when he was saying that it was insanely overvalued back then.
Given the current earnings potential and cash flows, I just can't get there. Maybe I'm just missing some part of the picture, but to me it doesn't make sense.
I mean, you're not alone. That's for certain. Look, price target went up to 800 yesterday from one firm. And today, on my earlier program, the halftime report, Josh Brown, who's been in NVIDIA longer than anybody I know, sold 20% of it. I want you to listen to what he said, and let's react on the other side.
It just feels like there are people who are so bullish they've run out of superlatives and ways to describe NVIDIA's market position and their technology dominance, and they're just like raising price targets. It's almost on a weekly basis. It's become breathless. I just felt like the chart went vertical and people have just like lost their minds. I'm as excited about generative AI as anyone else, I'm bullish. I'm just not that bullish where I think a stock should go up, 20% every month just because the alarm clock went off and the sun came up.
So in case you missed that, that was Josh Brown from Ritholtz Wealth Management, and he has owned the stock for a long time. It's not like he thinks it's expensive and he hasn't owned it. He has owned it for a long time and he thinks it's got out of control. And the same with the professor here. He owns it. Both of these people think that it's just become overvalued. So yesterday's video was about him coming back on the show a month later saying that he still thinks it's overvalued, and it even gone up since then after earnings, and they were sort of having him up about, what's the deal here? It's gone up. And so you were wrong. But this is what happens when there's exuberance, when there's a bubble. Can we say it's an AI bubble? Some people say no, some people say yes. I think it's definitely getting there. Now, if you're getting value out of this episode so far, I'd really appreciate it if you remember to hit that like button to help the algorithm to spread it to more people.
What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with them. I think AI has become this buzzword that people use to justify pretty much anything they want. I mean, I think collectively, AI is going to be a net negative for markets. It's going to be great positive for companies like NVIDIA. But I think the laziness with which people attach premiums to companies just because they see the word AI, and you see that partially with Microsoft as well, is, I think, terrifying because at some point in time, reality is going to play out and it's not going to match those expectations.
Well, that's interesting because that sort of reminds me of the dot-com bubble. He's saying there that it's going to be a net negative for markets, not necessarily for AI development. That's still going to go on. And that's what happened in the dot-com bubble. The development was still going on, although a lot of money was being pumped into it during the rising of the bubble. And Peter Thiel said this, that bubbles sometimes can be seen as a good thing because so much funding gets pumped in and there's a fast development over a short time. But the hangover after that, of course, could be years of lack of funding and markets not being interested and it not going so well, which happened then. And he's implying here that could happen if the market gets too carried away. And he is saying it is getting too carried away with Nvidia.
I'm wondering when you look at some of these other companies within the so-called Mag 7, which seems to be maybe decreased by one or two of late, like a Microsoft, for example. So Microsoft's 10-year historical average is low 20s. Now it trades in the low 30s. But what was Microsoft doing over the last 10 years? Is it legitimate that its multiple now is in the low 30s by relative to how profound this relationship with OpenAI can really be?
I think it's a company that's closest to creating a subscription model around AI in which it can make money. I can't think of another company that's as close.
Well, that's interesting. It's that Microsoft is the closest to making money from it. It's what I find interesting is that these AI models that are coming out, ChatGPT and others, they are charging for it. For the advanced version, Google's charging for their advanced version, although they've definitely had problems with it, but they're trying to charge for it. Whether a lot of people are paying for that yet or not is another matter. But there are these advanced models coming out. You've got the basic model, which is free often, but if you want the full capacity, the full power of it, you do have to pay. So there's definitely money that can be made here. If you think about Google search, they never charged for that. It was just an advertising model. Is this going to be different? So we're yet to see, but Microsoft is, as he says, the closest to making money or is making money. It's going to be interesting to see how over the coming months, the coming years, how money is going to start to be made from this rather than just the share prices of companies going up with the expectation of this that there's going to be a lot of money made. Now, I've made well over 200 episodes at this point, and I haven't really shared that much about myself. I thought it might be good to start doing that over time if people are interested in that, just briefly in each episode. So we're here in my home studio where I'm making videos every day now. If there's anything that you want to know about me in particular as we go on, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to share some things.
So part of that increase, again, comes from the reality that AI is going to open up new businesses. But as a long-term owner of Microsoft, again, I'm looking at $404 or $400 per share, and I'm saying, I'm definitely happy that it's gone up to 400. But again, a lot has to go right for this price to be the right price. And pricing in that expectation sets you up for unpleasant surprises down the road.
A lot has to go right. People are saying that Nvidia is priced to perfection. And in the interview yesterday, if you go back and look at that, I'll put a link in the description and at the end of this video. He was saying that the expectation is Nvidia has to have earnings of $400 billion, a rise of that to justify the price right now. And Microsoft is, he says, looking on the expensive side. And I said yesterday, looking back to Microsoft in the dot-com bubble when it became worth $600 billion way back then, it did become to be worth more than that, a lot more than that later on, but it did take more than 10 years, same with Amazon, to get back to that. So he's implying here that the similar could happen to Nvidia, where so much is being priced in, expectations of continued earnings. And as he said yesterday, they could go on for a quarter, another quarter, but after that, when expectations aren't met at some point, and people were incredibly nervous before this last earnings. I remember I did a live show on the earnings there, and I could see how nervous people were, and they did meet expectations, and maybe they will next time, but as he said, there might be a time when they don't, and what will happen to the price if it's priced to perfection and more. Now, if you're like me, you're always wanting to find a way to learn more about investing and with others. With that in mind, I'm going to put a link to the Art of Value Patreon community over there. I'm sharing exclusive material that I don't show anywhere else, including my stock portfolio, stocks that I'm researching. Hopefully we can have discussion about all things investing over there. So again, I'll put a link in the description and see you over there.
I mean, the forward PE, we're looking 38. So I hear you. What about Apple? Let's leave it with Apple. What are your thoughts here?
I think there are two companies in this 7 that if you really, really wanted to buy these stocks, you've never owned them, you say, I've missed out. One would be Tesla, which will surprise you because I bought Tesla just a couple of weeks ago at 180. And the other would be Apple, which I think is adjusted down. It's still a cash machine, but Apple over the last 15 years has lived from iPhone upgrade to iPhone upgrade. It has a bad year, then a good year based on whether there's a big upgrade during the course of the year. So I think Apple will bounce back a little bit. It's a slow growth cash machine, and people have to be realistic about what they're getting. But I think that at 188, it's as good a buy as any of the other 7. So Apple and Tesla would be my 2 buys among the 7 if you really wanted to add to of these stocks.
Well, that's interesting. He said he bought Tesla at 180 not too long ago. He has bought and sold it over the years. I remember when it was around 400, he was saying it was expensive then. It's a lot lower than that now. He's calling Nvidia expensive now, and we'll have to see what happens. Saying that Apple and Tesla are the cheapest of the Mag 7 there. And Apple, he said, is a cash flow machine, a low growth cash flow machine. And of course, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway owns that. They have for a long time. People made a fuss about them selling down in, with their last filing in that fourth quarter of 2023, but they only sold 1%. I mean, yes, that's a huge amount of money, but not to Berkshire Hathaway. So we can't say that they're selling down. I'd be surprised if they got out of that. But then again, their position is so massive, around, I think, 50% of their stock portfolio, even though Berkshire has a lot of other companies. Reminder that this was a month ago, 3 weeks to a month ago. So taking into consideration, what's happened to the stock since then, generally they've gone up. Nvidia's gone up so much in this month or so. So that's why they had him back on the show to defend almost his position. And he did, didn't change his position, of course, because he is called the Dean of Valuation and he's sticking with what he thinks, and we'll have to see what happens. Now, I'd love to know what you think. Do you agree with Aswath Damodaran here? Do you think that Nvidia is insanely overpriced and that Apple and Tesla might be the best buys within that 7 at the moment? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, if you happen to be watching this episode on YouTube, I'm going to put a link here to yesterday's episode, also about Aswath Damodaran talking about Nvidia, but a month later. And here, I'm going to put a link to a video of what YouTube thinks that you in particular should watch next. So go and see either of those now. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening to this one, and I'll see you in the next one.